welcome to the podcast. My name is Joanna Fleur. I'm your host here on Word Made Digital, and today's episode we have my friend James Adams. James Adams is from Visual Media Church. Maybe you already know about that company. Maybe you even use that company at your own church. Maybe you don't even know that your church is using this company. They create backgrounds for church worship. That's like visual displays of video behind the lyrics and the text on screens to help connect people into the worship experience. They do actually a bunch of other things, but that's sort of the bread and butter of that business. So I've got James on here talking about building a creative business. We're going to talk a little bit about his own business and what that looks like, but more in general around what he's learned about dealing with criticism and how to fail your way to success and when to spend your own money on something to take a risk or when to just do it yourself and not spend any money, all that kind of stuff. We're going to be looking at even some fun stories from his time working in film and video his whole career, including when he got his work featured in TMZ. That's that tabloid site. So it's kind of a fun story he's going to share with us. James and I, coming up, are going to be doing a daily podcast connecting his world of the pragmatic side of video and creative, and then my side is from communications and working in church, and really more of the pastoral and theological side of why and how we do communications and creativity. Looking forward to this podcast. We're going to be starting it soon. James and I can't wait to get you more information about that. So take a listen to this podcast. Hear me and James have this conversation. We had the opportunity to sit down in person and do it. And I think you'll get a taste of the kinds of content and the kinds of thinking and heart behind this other podcast that we're going to be starting very soon. That will be a short daily podcast to get in your ears. So can't wait to dive into this conversation with James, and I hope you can learn a lot. Maybe you want to take some notes as we do it. Here we go. Here's my conversation with James Adams.
You're listening to the Word Made Digital podcast with Joanna LaFleur, where we discuss all things creative and communications for the church. The church carries the best news in the world, so we want to help you be the best creatives and communicators in the world. Let's go.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the podcast. I'm hanging out here with my friend James Adams. And James is a guy who has worked in media, creative, visual, photography, video for his whole career. And so I'd love to dive in, James, with you about where this all began. Can you take us back? Go back to like your early 20s. How did you get into all this stuff?
Well, thank you for having me. Where did I get into all this stuff? I think I got started because I was dating a girl who wanted to be a journalist. Oh. And so I went to her school and watched them do like a live TV broadcast. And at the time I was working at a glass factory and it was really terrible. I was driving a forklift. And I had like a little bit of artistic skill, but I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And so I saw this class on camera doing like a TV production. And I said, well, I don't want to do that. But the guys in the room doing the graphics and doing the camera stuff, I basically was like, that looks easy. I think I'll do that. And so
that's easy.
And so 2 years later, I got accepted to the same program. And by then it had changed a little bit as, you know, cameras had gotten a little bit cheaper. And it had turned more into doing motion graphics, video, like creative videos, and doing some web design stuff. Okay. And so it was less about TV and more about like production company style stuff. And that's kind of what got into it. I originally did it because I thought it would be easy. And then I found as I went through it that I fell in love with the idea of just being able to create all kinds of media, whether it was graphics, 3D, video, or web.
And so, I mean, your career has taken a few different chapters, I guess, because you've started and stopped a company, and I mean, you've worked for other people, you've worked for yourself. Now you're doing a ton of stuff for church, and we'll get to that a little later in the conversation. But tell us about there's this part of your life where you traveled the world with this wealthy guy. I don't know if we want to name who he is. That's up to you. But tell us about what you were doing at that time of your life as a filmmaker.
So my very first job right out of school was working for a hockey team in sports. So that was a lot of fun, but it was crazy hours. I was the low man on the totem pole, so I got all the grunt work. But from that, I went into that being a graphics person, creating graphics for advertisers, sponsors, intro videos, the make some noise graphics where the levels go up and down and makes the crowd yell. I was that guy. But then my next job was I kind of fell backwards into working for a fashion company. And through doing fashion videos, like basically shooting like product videos with the models wearing the clothes and going up and down fake little runways just for TV screens and things like that within the stores. I ended up doing some work for the chairman of the company who owned the company, and it was this kind of jet-setting billionaire who traveled the world and kind of just did his own thing. And through doing some projects where he happened to be there, I ended up on the road with him almost 24/7. And that meant like traveling the world on a private jet and doing filming for different kind of charitable things he was doing, filming his life, his personal life, like filming family events, like
dinners, events,
making
parties.
A cinematic video about Christmas dinner, like that's
So what would he do with this stuff? Like it was for himself, or he'd share it with his loved ones, or
so some of the videos were meant to kind of show how he was traveling the world and touring factories,
like his brand. It's building his personal brand.
But then he also had he definitely. Like all these billionaires, they love the look of themselves in the mirror, and so some of these videos were just purely to when someone came on in the airplane, hey, here's my world travel videos, and it was just him like standing in front of pyramids and him
on cruise ships,
or like floating in the Dead Sea and like just flexing, and he was an older man, so it was comical and a little bit crazy. It was a lot crazy, but some of these videos. It was just wild. Just filming him, just traveling the world, really what it was. And he was really getting into the stem cell world. So it was like filming in hospitals around the world.
Trying to prolong his life.
Yeah, like getting into all these kind of weird ethical issues. And I was kind of like along for the ride, basically.
Yeah. And as a Christian, you're trying to understand, like, am I party to this by watching this happen?
Absolutely. And that was a time in my life where I wasn't necessarily following God closely. Right. I would still have defined myself as a Christian, but I was not walking the walk. But I still struggled with it because he lived this party life atmosphere, going out at 2 a.m. to clubs, and he'd be like, "Oh, come film at the club," and I'd have to film him standing in a club. Like it was the most ridiculous thing ever.
And he's an old guy.
And he's he was in his 70s at the time.
Yeah.
And it taught me a lot of things about like how money doesn't make happiness and all these kinds of things. But what it did teach me as a filmmaker was I basically had to edit everything on the fly. So it would be like if we were traveling somewhere or in a hotel sitting on my laptop for 5 hours because the next day he would want a video ready so that he could post it on his Twitter or on Facebook and things like that. Yeah. And so it was really challenging, and it was a pressure cooker environment. The idea of filming, knowing what kind of story you're going to tell, and having it ready to go the next day or the day after, and then having really
weird circumstances, you don't know if you're going to have power for your computer. You don't know
it's
all the hard drives, all the gear that you bring. You're doing it on the fly.
It's having to be able to react really fast and make choices to be able to finish the product. And then he was ultra critical of these videos, so it was lots of edits and learning to take criticism and not. And I mean, he's the boss, and he was the boss of everything. So there was no arguing with his criticism. There was no pushback. It was just you do it. And learning to accept that actually taught me a lot of things about taking criticism and learning how to edit and learning how to not just make it art, but make it about what that person's certain needs are.
Yeah. And I think that's probably part of why eventually you decided you wanted to go work for yourself. But before we get there, can you tell us about the TMZ thing? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. So there was this time where we went to London, basically last minute to go to the Olympics, and it was awesome. I got to go to the London opening ceremonies. I was sitting at the 12th row, right by the entrance and exit where the athletes were. So like LeBron James and all these famous athletes. Usain Bolt literally walked right by me. I was standing beside some people who were getting pictures taken with him, and it was just crazy. And I had my camera, and I was taking pictures, and it was wild. But the person who I was with sponsored one of the teams. He was giving some money towards one of the teams, and so we were at this embassy one night during the 2 weeks, and I'm standing outside with a few of the athletes who ended up going on to win gold medals before. So they hadn't. And they were from low-level athletic schools. They were not big-name athletes. No one would have known their names. So I'm standing out with them, just socializing, get to know them. Like, they were really friendly. They were just kind of normal people, just really great athletes. Yeah. And so I'm standing there talking, and along comes these two couples walking along, and just down the road, and kind of an off-the-beaten-path part of London, down by Hyde Park. And we are... and they come up and they say, hey, you guys want to exchange pins? Because all these athletes and a lot of sponsors get these pins that they're supposed to trade with the country that they're from. Okay. So they come up and they're like, hey, do you want to trade pins? And I was like, I know this guy. This guy, what is it? And it took me 1 second, but no one else knew it. And I was like, oh, this is Bill Gates. Like, Bill and Melinda Gates are standing here. I am as close to them as you and I. Like, I can touch them on the arm, and I'm having a conversation with them about, oh, where are you guys from? Oh, we're from the Seattle area. And I'm like, you're like the richest person on the earth. Like, and you're one of the most well-known people on the earth. Yeah. And the people I'm with have no clue. He's just some American guy who wants to trade pins. And I'm like, this is a moment. Like, this is crazy. Like, I'm standing on the street with Bill Gates. And so I decide, I'll whip out my camera and take a few pictures, maybe take a little video. As this is happening, I mentioned to a few people, it's Bill Gates, and just over the shoulder kind of thing. And a little bit of a crowd starts to leave the embassy because there's a celebrity outside. And so as I kind of pull the camera out from picture mode to video mode, now the crowd's really starting to form. And so the people are like, hey, can we take a picture? And he's now realizing, okay, people know who I am. And he's being very gracious. Yeah, I'll take some pictures, but I want some pictures with the athletes. Like, that's what I'm here for. And so what happens is this one girl whips out an iPad, right? Like an iPad.
So this is the leader of Microsoft.
Yes.
And the girl whips out an Apple product.
Yeah, totally speaking to what it's there for, to like be quick and take pictures on the fly. And I mean, this is 2012, so it's not everything is as big as it even is today. This is 6 years ago. And so this girl now takes a picture with an iPad, and then Melinda Gates kind of says, oh, don't take a picture with an iPad. And he kind of laughs and kind of like gives a little wave, like it's okay kind of thing. All the while, I'm recording this on video. Not for anything. Just like, I was just like, this is like, I'm going to record this because I'm going to send it to my buddies afterwards and, brag how I was hanging out with Bill Gates today. And so I'm recording it. So the crowd starts to get a bit bigger. There's like probably 20, 30 people. And so he's like, I'm going to be on my way. So they walk down the street and they leave. And, it's kind of a fun moment. So I'm back in the hotel with my buddy who's filming with me. And we're kind of looking through the footage and we're like, we got to do something. What can we do with this? And I was like, I wonder if TMZ would like be interested in it. Like, it's nothing... I would have had a problem if it made him look bad, but it was kind of just like an innocent moment, kind of funny that like Bill Gates taking his picture with an iPad. Like, it's not making anyone look bad. It's not sketchy.
It's not scandalous. It's
not
funny.
Scandalous. It's kind of funny. So I didn't find any ethical issues with it at the time. And so basically we emailed and got in touch with TMZ, and within an hour they were sending over a contract and they agreed to like pay for a price for it. We sent them like a sample, like a low res sample. They're like, yeah, we'll buy it, but like basically you have to give it all over and you have to sign off that you quote unquote work for us and all that kind of thing. So we send it off. The very next day we go to check out the show. And they have like Ronda Rousey, the UFC fighter, on there, like guest hosting with them in like their little like pit thing that they do in the office, and it's like one of their feature stories, and it's on YouTube if you look it up.
Yeah, so people can look it up. I think it's like Bill Gates
iPad,
London. Go on YouTube,
yeah, and so then they're like, oh, one of our guys in London got Bill Gates with an iPad, and they do this whole little back and forth thing. Kind of making fun of the Olympics and kind of making fun of how great the iPad is. And it was like, I always like show people like, that's like... Yeah,
that's your 5 minutes as a paparazzi photographer, videographer.
That's what it's like being a paparazzi. So it was, it's kind of cool to say you have that out there.
It's fun. Yeah. I mean, okay, so fast forward. I mean, you were, now you're in the Toronto area and you were living in another city in Canada and you had a business.
Yeah.
Was that like you were doing it on the side of this main work? I mean, it sounds like you didn't really have enough time to even do the work you were doing. Probably not a ton for the side business. You got into doing your own work. How'd that go for you?
So I'd only done as working for this fashion guy, I'd only done some side work because it was a full-time job. It was, never below 50 hours kind of a week. Yeah. And I was starting to get to the point where I wanted to do more for just individual clients. So it got to the point where I had met 3 other guys who were kind of buddies who were also just starting to do a bit of like an independent film company by themselves. And they were kind of like, we're thinking about kind of just doing this full time, like take the risk and jump out and just do it. It's really hard to get big clients if you're not committed to it full time. Like we don't really want to do the small independent music video artist and make, $500 here and there. Like that's not what we want.
You want like a $50,000 project.
We want we want something big, right? And so I met with them and they were about to start. And so I just said, you know what, I'm done with this job. And by that point, I had kind of come back to walking with the Lord at that time. And I realized I can't do this job and be honest about being a Christian and have this job. There's too many things too many situations that I'll be put in where, I will constantly be tested and tempted that it can't do it. So I just hard quit. I just said, I'm done. Wow. That's it. And I'm out. And the day after, on your own, the day after I quit is the day we started the company full time. Wow. And it was a blast. And we managed to get one of those big tourism contracts within a month.
Yeah. What kind of work were you doing at that time? Like technically, like you were a filmmaker, you were an editor, you were doing advertising. Like what was your job? We
were doing everything because it was three of us who were kind of filmmakers and one guy who was a business accountant kind of guy. And we were working out of the one guy's apartment. He had a 2-bedroom apartment. Yeah. And the 1 bedroom, which was the large master, was our office. And so the 4 of us were crammed in there, arguing, making decisions every day about like which direction we're taking the company and what kind of projects do we accept. And we were bold and brash, and we managed to get a tourism contract that lasted for 6 months of all of us working on it. That was like a nationwide, it was on airlines, it was all kinds of stuff. And we got to work with some really well-known names in the marketing world and a very big company. And we got to do kind of their medium level, wide range, go get everything in this region kind of tourism. And then we got to help out with the big ad, which was just a big time production, like, 20-person crew for a few days filming these advertisements. And so it was a lot of fun. Yeah. And yeah, it was a great little company to work for. And then
when you have to do everything, you kind of learn everything, or you become at least a generalist, I'm imagining, about all aspects of creative work. You have to know something about everything because there's only 3 of you. So you don't know, I'm thinking about like a lot of people who are listening to this. They're like, it's them and maybe 1 or 2 other people who are making creative work, communications work happen in their church or business context. And that's the same as running a small business. You have to do everything and figure out, how to use this small amount of resource to make it all happen.
And in that time, I learned a lot about what I really like doing. One of the 3 filmmakers was very much an artistic person. He lived all the way out there, being very artistic, very vision. And I learned about myself that I enjoyed building the business and being frugal and even doing the sales stuff. So I was the more level-headed when it came to sales stuff. So I found myself falling into a bit more of that role and kind of keeping everybody on track online. And then the other guy was all the vision. Here's the greatest thing we can do. And I was the pullback balance.
Good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, the good cop, bad cop scenario. And I learned a lot in that season because it was great to learn and learn to like, oh, we're not making any money for the first 2 months. Like we were paying ourselves a couple $100 every 2 weeks. Wow. So, but like that definitely teaches you to be committed. Anyone, there's a lot of people who want a job and they also want to get paid a lot just to do it. And this is a good lesson to be like, if you want to be committed to something, sometimes it takes time and commitment and not all the rewards are given to you up front when you start a business. Yeah. And that's the difference between having a job and owning a business is, when you get hired to do a job, you negotiate your salary and there's all these guarantees for you up front. When you start a business, there's no guarantees. It is, here's what I want to do and I'm going to put so much effort and I might not get anything back. Yeah. And I actually enjoy that. And there's a lot of people who aren't comfortable with that amount of risk, but I love that.
And so what do you think, I'd like to jump into the business you have today. But what do you think is the kind of personality that is suited to this? Because in the world of like Instagram, everybody wants to be a YouTube star, an Instagram star, or whatever. But not everybody honestly has what it takes to actually do that. So what do you think it takes? What kind of and I'm speaking for myself. I'm someone who has always worked for other people. I've never really had my own business, and so. maybe, I don't know if that means I don't have what it takes or it's just never been the right opportunity, but what kind of a person do you think is suited to that kind of work?
It's a lot of things. Like I'm in my 30s now, and I probably wouldn't have been able to do it in my 20s. I mean, you have to be like passionate and love what you're doing, but then you also have to be. You can't be a dreamer all the time, because dreamers have big ideas and then nothing gets done. You have to be really realistic about what can be accomplished, looking at whatever your product is. If it's speaking on camera or creating a product, it's called product market fit. It's really having a harsh look at what am I doing, and is it valuable, and is it something that other people want, and is it fulfilling a need or a pain point that they have? And then it's really just being goal setting. So when I started Visual Media Church, I said, I'm going to do this for a full year, even if not one single person buys one of the things that I make. Why? Because I need time to figure out what's working, what's not, and you need to have lots of failures in order to be succcessful. No one just creates something and is a massive success. It takes time and refinement. It looks like that to people outside.
Exactly. But you don't see everything that led up to it.
When I started, I invested $2,000. That was my budget to say, I'm going to do this, and if by the 1 year I haven't made that back, then I will quit. But it was 1 year. It wasn't 2 weeks. Because if you set such a low, it didn't do anything in 2 weeks. The website was terrible, and the products weren't. I had a lot to learn and figure out by trial and error, and so you have to give yourself real goals and then be really organized. Because people say, well, it's easy to do something like that when you have the time, and the ability to do it, because now it's a business that's running. But at the time, I was working another full-time job doing editing work for a university. And so I was putting all my time after work into this. Like, it wasn't just an easy thing. I had to be committed. And I said, every night for 2 hours, I'm going to work on this. And on Saturdays, I'm going to work on for 4 hours. And that takes sacrifice. That took an agreement between me and my wife to say, here's why, and here's the investment, and here's
that's a good tip too. Make sure if you're married, is your partner okay with this risk, because they're involved in it too.
It's risk and reward, and you have to accept that it might not work.
Yeah.
You can have big dreams, but you also have to be really realistic that most businesses fail. And most ideas fail. And that doesn't mean you just have one idea.
Doesn't mean you're a failure. Yeah. But that one didn't work.
And if this idea Visual Media Church hadn't worked, I would have just gone on to the next one.
Yeah.
Like, that's the way you have to have the mentality.
So we're talking around it, but we haven't yet said, what is your business? What do you do?
So I have a site called Visual Media Church, which creates, mostly the main focus is backgrounds for church worship. So behind the lyrics or on visual displays, it's
on
some sort of artwork or motion graphics or video that is meant to enhance the worship experience. And so the reason why I started is I am not the first and I'm not the last to come up with products for screens for churches. But what I noticed when I started, it was a lot of just motion graphics. So this would be lines and particles and little glowing things, which are all great. Computerized shapes and simulations, which are all great. But I'm a person who loves the outdoors. I love hiking. I love being in nature. That's where I connect with God. And I said to myself, I personally don't look at that and feel in any way it tells a story or leads me to celebrate and worship our Creator, our God, our Jesus, the Holy Spirit. Nothing brings me personally to that place. They may look nice, they may be very artistic, they may be beautifully rendered, but they don't add anything to me. They are just there. And so what I said was, what is it that's missing? And I felt at the time like it's outside. It's waves crashing. It's beautiful mountainscapes. It's the earth. It's the creation around us. To me, says it's God writing to us and saying, "Look how big and powerful and beautiful I am. Yeah. Like, can you not see the scale of who I am?" In this, Mount Everest is so massive, yet to God it's so small. But to us, I look at that and I can't not see God. And so when I personally looked around, there was nothing that was doing that. So that's where I said, I'm going to invest $2,000, go to Iceland, which I found was just, there's something breathtaking about it. And I'm going to film the things that I think scream, I am God, I am here.
Wow, yeah.
And
these like massive landscapes.
Absolutely. And big giant waves crashing and, like dormant volcanoes and snow-capped mountains and things like that. That was the basis of it. Let's take the idea of what was motion graphics and build a story. So many of our songs is like, our church has a song, "What is a mountain?" Well, like, why would you put shapes and lines and particles when you really should just have backgrounds that are giant mountains. Or there's popular songs called oceans.
Yeah.
Again, why would you do particles? You should have water crashing and big giant waves, and that's what ocean is to me, right?
Yeah.
And so many of our songs, when I even looked at the lyrics, half of them are nature-based, because that's what we see in front of us every day, and there was no one providing that. And at the time when I started, there was many people said, "Oh, no one needs that. No one needs that." Like, they're
so you
fine
had
with
people
it.
who discouraged you.
Oh,
right?
I had a few
You're
people
starting this business, and people are saying it's not going to work, or but you took a risk.
I had a few people that I respected, who I thought would be supportive, who said, "Not going to work. No one's going to like it. No one's going to use it. I know what people want," and basically said, "Don't do it." And I said, I think you're wrong. I'm going to do it anyways.
You went with your gut.
I went with my gut. Absolutely.
And it may not have worked.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there could have been a certain, maybe you just, even if just you didn't know how to sell it, it might have been a nice thing, but if you didn't know how to do the business side of it.
Absolutely. And
when
when I launched, I would say the website was bad and the product needed a lot of work. It took a full year. It took that full year to get enough customers to be something like, okay, this could become something one day. And it took that full time to fix the website, make it better, make it easier for people to get access to this content, get time for people to know, oh, who are you? You're just, when you first launch, you're just somebody, and they kind of like, oh, it's nobody. And then it takes time for people to see examples of other people using to say, oh, this is something really good. I should try it out. I should check it out.
Yeah. And so I think some of that anonymity can be good, because you're still trying to figure out what your product is, who your market is, what your creative style and look is. And so you're not doing that in front of an audience of thousands of churches that have huge expectations that are going to, that you're about to, like, if you do one wrong turn, they're all going to quit, and I don't know. But because you only had, at the beginning, a few customers, you had the freedom to learn the business and learn the creative work. And
that's the thing that you have to really embrace when you're first starting is, there's a stat about like a battleship, right? An American battleship or aircraft carrier. It takes miles and miles to turn because it's so big, it's so heavy. It doesn't just turn on a dime. And when you're a small new business, you're the little tiny boat. You can just make quick little zigzag turns and change course and change directions really fast. And you have to embrace that, because it takes the people ahead of you. You can look and see what they do, but you have to make choices that are going to turn. So when something is not working, you have to be adaptable. And that's why I built even my business on a Squarespace. Everyone who's been in business for a long time and have these big websites that have cost thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars say, oh, that's crazy, it's dumb, it's not good enough. Well, in my opinion, it's been adapting so much even in the past 2 years that I've used it, that it really does a great job. And you know what?
And it's changed, and what they're allowing users. I use Squarespace as well, and what I like about it too is that they're constantly getting better as a company, because they are a big company, so that we as smaller users get to benefit from all these new additions of
absolutely. And it's about figuring out the risk. Like, I could have easily said, I'm gonna spend $10,000 of my money from that should be going towards my house or other things to build a website, but that's so much risk that you don't know. So why not spend $25 a month? Because then if it does fail, you haven't lost a ton of money. You've lost a lot of time, but then you've not made it worse.
You're not going
and now that even the business has grown, I still see no need to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a website. I love what mine is doing. I love that I can be on my phone and change things on my website.
Wow, can you really? Like, if you saw a spelling mistake or something, you'd go on your phone.
You have to do that from a computer, but you can write blog posts and you can send out messages to people and you can engage with people. Like this past week, I was in Iceland filming, and there were customers asking me questions about the website, and I'm standing in the middle of nowhere. I have a little Wi-Fi thing that was attached to my car, and I was answering customer questions while waiting for a time-lapse to finish at midnight in howling wind, and I'm on my phone through my website, answering questions and directing people. Yeah. And it's so hard to do that when you've spent all this money on things. It's hard to adapt and change really fast.
Yeah. And, another thing that I want to touch on out of what I'm hearing you say is when you're small, you're able to receive this feedback. But it's going back to what you said earlier about criticism, that you learned working for this sort of eccentric billionaire guy about receiving criticism and adapting really quickly. You had to change whatever, obviously he was the boss there, you did whatever he said. But what have you learned about criticism? How do you view criticism or people complaining or not liking something on your on your site or with your products?
Anytime someone has an issue or doesn't necessarily like the way that I made something or build something, or even like I have other people that do stuff for Visual Media Church now too, I always take note of it, but you have to be careful not to ride the highs and the lows. So you have to look for trends. So I always keep notes on if someone says, hey, I didn't like this for whatever reason. You can't be like, oh, okay, now I'll never do that again, or I'll take it off the website right away, or yeah, let me fix it right away. You have to watch for trends. And it's funny, I remember doing a survey about a year ago of like, what's your favorite packs, top 3, and what's your worst 3? Like, be critical. Tell me exactly which ones didn't work. And the same one showed up either as the best or the worst for people.
Oh, like one person would say it was their favorite.
So one person said the city pack was their absolute favorite. And of course, they live in a city. And the other person who listed it as their worst said, well, I live out in the country, out in Nebraska, and it doesn't really work for me. Yeah. So like, I would love to not see those again. And they were the tops and the bottoms of different people's. And so if I said to myself, if I took the one opinion and said, I'm never going to do that again, I'm then excluding a whole bunch. So what you learn from that is, okay, what we really need to do is not be making one pack a month, because then you're excluding half your audience each time. Now let's start doing more than one and making sure that they are very different. You're not going to make everybody happy each month, but now you are catering to a lot of people. It's a little extra work on our part to make things move faster, but that's how you get more out to people, and you listen to what they want, and you try to hit all of what they're trying to achieve as well.
Yeah. Now, I mean, your customers are churches or Christian organizations, usually churches. And like in the past, your customers were like, you're talking about a tourism thing. You're talking about this billionaire. TMZ at one time was your customer. And you worked at a university. You've done tons of jobs with media and film and creative work, but why have you gone into church world as the focus of your business? Do you view that as ministry? For you, is it just about the money side of it? Like what is it about that attracted you?
I've grown up in the church. My dad is a pastor, and I've been on the worship team. And then as I got older, I got involved with making videos for church and news videos and things like that. And what I learned is, because I grew up in it, I actually have a good sense of where church life is at. Mm-hmm. I've never been a full-time staff member at a church, but because I've spent so much time either, in conversations with my own family my dad works for a church, and I hear
professional Christians.
I hear his opinions on things, and I hear his struggles and the ups and downs of that world. But then I've gone to church every single week, plus youth group and everything, 2 days a week for my entire life. I actually have a bit of a knowledge base and a bit of a feel for my own community. And I brought what I knew in media to what I live out in my life every single day. And I feel like it gives me a lot of perspective because I am my own customer. I do go to church and I do worship, and I see what works and what doesn't. And so there's a huge advantage to that. Someone who doesn't go to church, who then decided they wanted to make a church media company. So someone, a non-Christian, non-believer, decided they were going to enter in this market.
Financial opportunity.
They would be lacking an understanding of the community in the same way that I couldn't then create media for some other people group that I'm not a part of, right? Yeah. Exactly. I wouldn't speak their language. I wouldn't understand the touch points. I wouldn't be involved in even what's going on in social media in this world, and what's working for people. What are the issues? What are the controversies? Yeah. You wouldn't know those nuances. And so what I love about it, and what can be difficult about it, is you're mixing business with your life and your faith. Yeah. And so there's a fine line that can be walked there. But I also feel like I know what's going on and what people need and what people would like.
And I know that you and I, this is maybe like, it's not positioned this way on your website, but I know because we're friends and we've had these conversations. You think about that even in how you price stuff. And again, this podcast is not intended to be an advertisement for your business, but what I'm talking about more, you as a creative business person. You're thinking about how to serve. I know, because we've talked about it. You think about how to serve the church with even what you charge, because I think you could charge more for what you do, but it's your heart for the church coming out, because this isn't the hockey company or the multi-billionaire or whatever. This is a church. So how can I create a product that will be excellent, but will be affordable for them? I just think that's something I always have respected about your approach to business. It's not all business.
Yeah. And the focus is never, you have to pick. There's mega churches and there's small churches. And so the prices on my site are set for the small churches, and it's great if the big churches can use it. Like, the price doesn't go up if you have a 5,000, 10,000 person church.
Right.
My prices, I'm still going to charge them the same because it's still the church.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to come to that place sometimes for people. Like, oh, a big church has tons of money and tons of budget. Like, they should be paying me 10 times as much. But my goal has always been, how do you serve the church? And then how do the small churches of 100, 200 people find value in what I do and can still afford it? And I think the prices are set that they can afford that price. And we're catering to them. Like, as much as even on our Instagram and Facebook, you love the big pictures with the big giant LED walls with your products, and it's like big and flashing, there's lights, and there's a huge attraction to seeing that because it shows off what you do so well. But even on our Instagram page, you will see the small little church with an older projector and 100 people max. I will still post when people tag us in those, because that is we don't discriminate against small churches. We're not about just the big flashy. Like,
you want to make it work.
Everyone is a part of the church, and so I don't want to discriminate against anyone because of size or budget or where they're located. So, I mean, I love seeing it in small churches and places around the world. Like, I've gotten pictures from the Emirates. I've gotten pictures from Africa of someone who had a pack and had bought one bag. Like, that's amazing. Like, something that I filmed here in North America and shot in Iceland is being used in Kenya. Like, wild that I have some... As a company, there's some small impact on that. Yeah.
I mean, and you live more than most of us do. Probably most listeners here, their context is not full-time business services for church. And I know you and I have had lots of conversations about that dynamic of people who create businesses or who are making their money providing some sorts of services, consulting, expertise for church. What are you seeing as things that sort of stand out as like, ugh, like that's gross, or like, yay, like that's awesome? Like, when you're thinking about people you want to partner with in business, other creative people, what gets you excited, or what stuff that you wish people would be more cautious about? I don't know, kind of open-ended.
I think the cautious thing is definitely something that's been playing on my mind a lot lately. There's just a lot of people who have a lot of opinions on things who aren't qualified to have opinions on it. And the problem that I see is there's lots of people offering even theological opinions, or how do I help you get this type of person into your church? And I think there's a certain group of people who don't sit back and say, why does this person have the answer? And should they have the answer? Like, so I'm doing some videos with you. And what I like about doing the videos with you is you have actually, not me, you have gone to school for theology and training and communications. And you have a whole set of skills that I don't have. So if I got in front of the camera and started telling people how they should, or what my opinion is on something, it's really just a personal opinion with no education, no training. It's just an opinion from a random person who doesn't really probably have the experience to give an educated and be leading people in that way. I can lead people on what kind of media to do and what kind of video software and editing and how to shoot, because that is something that I have experience and training on. Yeah. So there's a lot more people showing up in the media world these days who have an opinion, but their focus is really just to drive business. And you can often see that's their goal. So that's what I would caution people against. And then the things
the source, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Where are we getting like it's even like what you're saying with some people from Nebraska don't like the cityscapes, but then another person, that's their favorite thing. So what I'm hearing is this, like, when we're receiving any kind of advice, whether that's criticism or we're looking for best practices in a certain thing, or I don't know, it's how do you reach guys in your church, or how do we get young people in our church, or it's I mean, there's
if the answer is that person who's doing its product, maybe not the best source, right? Because there's so much bias. So I'll say that even about myself. Like, I'm here, we're doing this podcast, I have a product, but I'm never going to sit here and tell you that the reason or the way to get more people into your church is to use Visual Media Church products. There you go, use our products and you'll be successful.
Solved.
No, that's not what it is.
Yeah.
Our products are here to enhance worship, and some people
It
aren't
works,
going to like them.
yeah.
A lot of people love what we have, but it's not for everybody, and my product is not the answer. And it really bothers me when I see people posting that here's a spiel, and then my products will save you and help you. Follow me, trust what I'm doing because I have the answers.
Yeah.
That to me raises a lot of red flags, and it doesn't mean that those people are necessarily bad, but there's a fine line between church and business, and that is approaching the line too closely, where if you're trying to lead people to God and help churches, other fellow Christians, you have to be careful to not always have the answer, because none of us have all the answers for everything.
Yeah.
And when you're asking for money for the answers, again, another step closer to that line.
Yeah. Well, it is something that out of what we've been talking about behind the scenes and what we're trying to create together is like free resources for people. How do we take this stuff we have in our heads, this knowledge or experience that we have from really actually doing it, and offer it to people for free? Because the point is to help, not to, I don't know, make a buck. Like you and I, we already have jobs. We're doing these things. Yeah. We get a salary. So the stuff that we're partnering in together at this point, like, it's to just help people. We get asked these same questions all the time. So how can we point people at answers? And I think it's too, like what I'm seeing, and we've talked about all this before, but like, I'm coming at it as someone who has more of a theological perspective on church stuff. Just because we can do something technically doesn't mean we should. And I think sometimes people are touting ideas or solutions to things, but not necessarily thinking about the consequences of that decision. So for example, if we live stream our services, what are the theological consequences of people not physically attending church anymore? How do they take communion? How is baptism happening? How are we having accountability and prayer for one another? And all these kinds of things that just because we can do it doesn't mean we always should. And there's an approach that is just pragmatic about business. This is a solution versus is that in the church the best solution, a Bible-based solution, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and making it less about money and actually about reaching people with the best news in the world.
Absolutely. Like with my business, there are free resources, but at some point it costs time and money to go get those things. Yeah, so there's going to be a cost associated. Yeah. And that's why the business I've built is around lots of people using it so that it can stay really affordable. You can go hire a video company to go create custom backgrounds for you for thousands of dollars because they have to pay someone for a week worth of work and travel. There's a reason why it's high. They're not trying to take tons of money from you. There's a cost associated with everybody's time involved. This model is I'm going to go make it. Yeah. And here's it's a small price to pay to get access to all of it. And it works because of a lot of people use it. Yeah. And that's why we continue to add more and build more resources for people. Yeah. And then also give away, because there are going to be lots of churches who don't have any budget. I mean, I do see people who say to me, message me, hey, I can't necessarily afford it because I'm actually paying for it out of pocket from my church. They don't have money for it. So that's where I say, well, you know what? We need to make our free resource section even better for you. Because,
there's no money.
Wow, you are really putting up your own wallet in order to help people at your service.
Yeah, wow. So, I mean, just in the close, young creatives coming up in media and whatever, they have dreams of starting their own businesses. What would be like a piece of advice or something that you would encourage them with today?
Definitely learn how to do as much of everything as you can. Don't just be a specialist, also be a generalist. Learn how to do your own website. At some point, you're going to have to maybe pay people to help you if you start becoming more and more successful. But I see so many people saying, yeah, I hired someone to do a website, I hired someone to do this, and I hired someone to do that, and you've spent so much money before you've made. So there are so many resources that if you are a photographer, that will help you learn to make your own beautiful website to advertise your stuff and how to be...
And do graphics on social media.
And how to do graphics and do social media. Always be frugal with it. Always, it's the lean startup mentality. Always figure out whether or not it's working and do as much of the work yourself because you don't have to pay yourself a fee on top of it. Learn to do as much as you can while still working crazy hard to be good at whatever that specialty thing is you're at. I think a lot of people make excuses. I'm really busy, and they fill their life with lots of social events, and they think once I hit 35 hours, that's my week. Well, if you're going to be successful in your own business, you have to put in more. And I'm not advocating to be unhealthy about it and not have social life and not go to church and not have friends and things like that. But you have to be dedicated to it. You can't put in just a little few hours here and there and be successful at anything. Yeah. I mean, do you want the doctor helping you when you're sick? The guy who, I study for an hour once a week and they gave me a degree anyways. No, you want the guy who
20 hours
who spent 8 years training because you don't want to be his one mess up, right? And that's the way you have to look at yourself, is like, you need to be so good at what you do that you can fix and solve any problem and make it as good as possible. You're not going to get there by, I did an hour and I did one YouTube tutorial. No, go out and do it more. Like, get better, constantly refining. Like, you have to be dedicated to it. Yeah, and I think that's the missing link for a lot of people. There's a lot of people who I see who are crazy good photographers or crazy good video people. And the thing that they're missing is they're so dedicated to making their thing look good, but all the other pieces around it,
how to make it a business,
is missing. Yeah. And they're unable, or maybe they're scared to do it, but it doesn't take all that much. Once you get rolling, the first step is the hardest. Once you get moving with it, it's like a snowball going down the hill. It just rolls and rolls and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And like I said, there's lots of creative people who are really good at doing those things, but they can't get it to the next level. And with the world of online tutorials and things like that, there are so many resources that can help you get it going.
Awesome. James, thanks. There's lots of knowledge, experience in your head. It's good to get some of it out for our audience, so I'm sure they'll be pumped up. Go work hard, everybody. Go start that business.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Well, thanks so much to James for that conversation. It was great to sit down with him a few months ago and do that with him and just hear more insight into the business of creativity. I hope you enjoyed that conversation because on a separate podcast, separate to Word Made Digital, James and I, through Visual Media Church, are going to be doing a daily pod for you guys. This is going to be practical stuff from his perspective as a doer every day, owning his own business and creativity for church and doing media and film for church. And then from my perspective, living every day in the church, working full-time in church, and coming maybe more from a pastoral or a theological approach to what I do. I think it's going to be a nice balance as we banter about that and bring up current issues, answer questions. It's going to be a short podcast, 5 days a week. I will give you more information about that when it comes up. You can check for that here on Word Made Digital. We'll do a little intro and teaser to that here coming up. But that'll be a separate podcast. Next week is the last episode of season 1. I can't believe it. We have one more for season 1. It's going to be with Rich Birch from Unseminary. You probably have already heard or know about the Unseminary podcast. It's all about everything they never taught you in seminary. So on Unseminary, Rich breaks down really practical things about how to grow church, serve in church, build church. And we're going to talk about some practical church growth communication strategies, how to talk about church growth and how to grow the church and lead through change through good communication. It's going to be a great conversation with Rich. That'll be the thing that ends off season 1 of Word Made Digital. And then from there, we're going to take a little pause before we dive into season 2. Actually, season 2, we're building some sponsorship and some financial support for the podcast. If you're interested in that, if you have a business and you want to get involved financially through advertising or through promoting on the podcast, would love to talk to you about that. You can find me through my website or the links down in the show notes. But yeah, we're going to be building into season 2, bigger, better, lots of exciting guests to bring to you. People like The Belonging Co., people who are doing Hillsong television stuff. We have all kinds of people from all kinds of places that maybe I can't give all away right now, but you're going to love season 2. So make sure you're subscribed here to the podcast. Keep telling friends about it. I love when I'm seeing on social media that you're posting about it or taking a quote or telling other people about this podcast. That's how it's going to grow and ultimately help more people be inspired in their own communications and creativity. So as we grow into season 2, maybe you want to go back and binge some more on season 1 if you haven't had a chance to listen to all these episodes. We've got one more for you next week, so we'll see you next week as we round out season 1 with Rich Birch. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Word Made Digital podcast with Joanna LaFleur. Head over to joannalafleur.com for more practical tools, interviews, and videos for creatives and communicators. We'd love to help you be the best you can be at communicating the best news in the world. Tap that subscribe button